Hello there, folks. My name is Stephen McCracken and welcome to Turas in association with Limavady Area Ancestry. Today, I'm just going to hand you over now to one of our lecturers, Mark Dougherty, who's going to introduce the next talk. Okay, thank you very much for all coming.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and everyone. You're very welcome to what should prove to be a very interesting talk indeed tonight. I'll keep it very brief, so I'd just like to introduce my good friend, Linda Ervine, somebody who I admire very much for what she is doing. She is a proud East Belfast woman, born and bred, and a very keen advocate for the Irish language. And she runs an organisation called Turas, which is based on the Lower Newton Ards Road in the heart of East Belfast. So I'll now hand over to Linda. Linda, you're very welcome if you'd like to start the talk.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here.
Sorry, I'll interrupt just one more time, Linda, before you start. I'd just like to encourage everyone, if you have any questions, you can, as is the normal format, just type them in the chat box, or if you prefer to speak yourself, there'll be an opportunity to do that at the end. So please send questions as you go, and there'll be an opportunity to discuss afterwards. Okay, Linda, over to you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, so we're just going to have a wee bit of fun, and I'm going to ask a few questions and just try and get people sort of thinking and maybe get a wee bit of debate. So first thing I'm going to ask is, well, whose language? You know, who owns the Irish language, if you can own a language? So that's what I just called the talk tonight, whose language? And we're going to have a bit of a cultural quiz. So my husband's a great quizzer, and we'll see if people know the answers to these. And you look a very intelligent bunch, I have to say. So, but I hope there's something that maybe you aren't aware of. So the first one, we're going to start off with a really easy one. And that is, what is the origin of the place name Belfast? And I'm ashamed to say that until I was in my 40s, as someone who was born and brought up in Belfast, who's lived their whole life in Belfast, I didn't know the answer to this. But here's a choice for you. Does it come from the Irish? Is it Bale? So Bale is your mouth, Farstje, sandbank forward, mouth of the sandbank forward. Or is it Belfast, called after King Billy's horse who could run really fast? Now, I think this audience probably know that it's got nothing to do with King Billy's horse, but sadly, there are people who do think it's King Billy's horse that the Belfast was called after. Now, 95% of the place names in Northern Ireland come from the Irish language. And I suppose for me, one of the greatest enjoyments of learning the language has been the fact that you start to learn about your own environment, and you start to realize that these names are not just random words, but they actually have a meaning. And the meanings are beautiful because Gaelic place names are descriptive and they tell you something about the place. And I suppose I just never thought before I started learning Irish, why do you get the same elements in place names? Why do the same sort of words keep coming up all the time? And I really felt like, you know, I've been living my whole life with a paper bag over my head that I didn't question this. And I really think it's important that people should know more about the place names, and maybe we wouldn't have as much controversy over the bilingual signage and things like that. Okay, so moving on and getting into the paramilitaries now. So I'm going to ask you, which paramilitary group has an Irish language motto? Anybody, any ideas about that one? Any thoughts? Is it a Republican paramilitary group, or is it a loyalist paramilitary group? Well, it's not a Republican one, it's a loyalist one. And this is it. It's the Red Hand Commando. And this is their flag. And their motto is Lao, Lao Jerrig Abu. In the south, they would say Lav, but in Ulster, in our dialect, we say Lao. And your Lao is your hand, Jerrig, red, and Abu, kind of victory or forever. So they're very proud of their Gaelic motto. Now, I have to be honest and say they're based across the street from me, the Red Hand Commando, and their Irish isn't great, so they tend to say lamb, dergaboo, but that's something that we're working on. So which passport contains the Gaelic language? Is it the British passport? Or is it the Irish passport? Or is it both? Well, the British passport, this is it. It's written in 3 languages, and it's written in English, it's written in Welsh, and it's written in Gaelic, and it's Scottish Gaelic. Scottish Gaelic's interesting because it originally came from Ireland and went over to Scotland, also went to the Isle of Man. And eventually, although at one time it was the same language, it's now known as a sister language. And it had a lot of Norse influence on it. But you can read, Irish speakers can read Scottish Gaelic easily enough. It's just a wee bit more difficult to understand. Okay, another question. Which passport contains Ulster Scots? Would that be the British passport? Or would that be the Irish passport? Or would it be both? Well, Ulster Scots is in the Irish passport. There's no Ulster Scots in the British passport. And here we have a beautiful Ulster Scots poem by James Orr, one of the great and one of the most famous of the Ulster Scots poets from Antrim. And I'm not an Ulster Scots speaker myself, so I wouldn't be able to tell you what all this means, but it's beautiful. Because of course, you know, Ulster Scots is a language of Ireland. Moving on to football now. So which football team's fans have a Gaelic motto? Would that be Rangers or would that be Celtic? And well, it's Rangers. And here we are. So this is their motto here. This is the official motto of the Rangers fans, Shinna na Dine, which means we are the people. And I was given this particular t-shirt. I was in the Isle of Lewis, and the Isle of Lewis has a Rangers club, and it's actually the biggest of all the Rangers clubs. It has more supporters, more Rangers supporters than any other club in the UK. So when I was there, they presented me with this t-shirt, an official Rangers supporters t-shirt. Now, they gave me a choice. They offered me either a black one or an orange one, and I don't know what it was. Something just drew me towards the orange, and I'm not sure what that was about, but there you go. And I do wear it on certain occasions. Okay, so moving on. Which regiment has an Irish language motto? There's another little thing to think about. Which regiment has an Irish language motto? And here it is, and it's Fochaballa, which is the motto of the Royal Irish Regiment, and it's an Anglicisation of the Irish, Fine Valach, which means clear the way. And it's a flag that I see flying in the community, in the loyalist community that I live in. But sadly, a lot of people don't realise that it's from the Irish language. Here's another question I want to think about is, why do the Emmons give their children Gaelic names? What's that all about? You know, all these Gaelic names. Well, what are they doing that for? So let's have a think about that. So here's some Gaelic names. Okay, we've got Angus, Angus, one, and choice. That's what it means. We've got Dougal, Dougal, black-haired stranger. We've got Duncan, Donahue, Brown and Battle, sort of brown-haired warrior. We've got Finlay, and my grandson's called Finlay, so we're guilty of the Gaelic names too. Finlayach, blonde-haired hero, and he certainly is. We've got Kenneth, Kinnach, which means handsome. And we've got Kyle from Kale, skinny. So there we go. There's where a lot of these Gaelic names are, and people have Gaelic names and they don't even realise they are Gaelic. I also want to think about this because I find this interesting about how people divide up being an Ulster Scot or a Gael. And obviously you have to take sides. So if you're an Ulster Scot, then you can't have anything to do with that Gaelic stuff. Or if you're a Gael, you hate that Ulster Scot stuff. And for me, when I started learning Irish, I had no interest in Ulster Scots. I didn't know anything about Ulster Scots. Well, I thought it was something that you made fun of. I thought it was something that you had a bit of a laugh at. And it was actually Irish speakers who pulled me up on that and said, no, hold on a minute, this is a language and you need to have respect for it. Also, it was something that some people thought they were going to use as a stick to beat me with. So it was, you know, why he's not teaching Ulster Scots? What's wrong with Ulster Scots? So I didn't want to take the position of, well, because I like the Irish language, I obviously hate Ulster Scots. So I made it my business to go and find out about Ulster Scots. And when I did, I realised that it had been around me all my life. And even though I'm not an Ulster Scots speaker, I'm from Belfast, there are lots of Ulster Scots words in my vocabulary, especially from my grandmother. And they have a beauty. You know, it is something very real and something lovely and something, I suppose, to be respected and cherished in the same way as the Irish language should be. And I also realised other things. So one of the things, when I looked at the like of the Ulster Scots Agency's website, was I realised that a lot of the symbolism used to represent Ulster Scots is Gaelic. It's Highland, it's not Lowland. So for instance, you know, this is Highland dancing. And it's sort of, I find it amusing because I've been in situations where there was a cross-community event, but unfortunately the audience weren't, they were very cross, not particularly cross-community. And the Highland dancers come in and they got a cheer, and the Irish dancers come in and they got a grunt. But they didn't realise that they were all doing Gaelic dancing, you know, just from different parts. I also want us to think about the language, Ulster Scots and Irish, because they are two separate languages. Ulster Scots is a dialect of Scots, and Scots is a language officially. And again, people take up one side or the other. I remember giving a talk one night and a woman said to me at the end, I'll stick with my own language, dear, Ulster Scots. But what she didn't realise was that the Scots language and Ulster Scots is littered, absolutely littered with Gaelic words, because the two languages have borrowed into each other. And that's not surprising because people were living cheek by jowl. And in Scotland, the Irish language went to Scotland and spread throughout Scotland. Most people in Scotland at one period spoke Gaelic, and then the Scots language and the English language moved in and sort of pushed the Gaelic language out to the sort of west coast and out to the islands. But people overlap their languages. So as one language moves in, they hold on to bits of that. And we had the same here then in Ulster. So I want to just look at this. And in Ulster Scots, you've got a word griskin. And some of you may be familiar with the word griskin. It means a little bit of cheap meat. And when I was a child, my nana used to send me up the Newton Arch Road to buy griskins. Well, it's an Irish word, griskin, and it means a little piece of meat. In Ulster Scots, you give a good gulder, a good shout. Again, that's an Irish word, gulder, to give a shout. In Ulster Scots, you get up to your neck and clabber with mud. There's a very famous poem about being up to your oxters and clabber. It's an Irish word, clabber. It means muck. In Ulster Scots, there's a word dullahan, which means a trout. And in Irish, there's a word dullahan, which means a brown trout. In Ulster Scots, you can have a clachan, which is a little collection of houses, a little community of houses. And in Irish, you have a clachan, which is a little community of houses. In Ulster Scots, you have the word bra, and it's comes from the Scots. And I know my stepfather, when I was a child, couldn't get work here, and he went to Scotland for work, and he came back keeping us going as kids and saying it's a bra brick moon lick nick the new, and we didn't know what on earth he was talking about. Well, that word bra, there's it in Irish, bra, and it means nice. It's bralum. Okay, moving on from language. And I just want us to think about this one. Which denomination claimed the Irish language? Was it Catholic Church, or was it one of the Protestant churches? So which denomination claimed the Irish language? Well, it was the Presbyterians, and in 1833, the Presbyterian General Assembly termed the Irish language our sweet and memorable mother tongue. And in 1843, the Presbyterian Church made it a requirement for their trainee ministers to have a knowledge of the Irish language. When I went to Scotland, I visited the, I visited the Presbyterian churches on the Isle of Lewis, where people's first language is Gaelic. And they have a lovely tradition there. They only sing the psalms in their churches. They don't have hymns. They sing unaccompanied, and they have a presenter who stands at the front, and he sings sort of a line, and then it's followed by the congregation, and it's absolutely beautiful, absolutely wonderful. And it's not a performance for them, it's just part of their worship. We have the same tradition here in the Reformed Presbyterian Church, where they don't sing hymns, they only sing the psalms. They sing them in English, but they also have a presenter. So it's the same tradition, and that's where it comes from, this Gaelic tradition. Okay, thinking about Belfast now. So the Belfast branch of the Gaelic League was formed. It was formed 2 years after the Gaelic League itself formed, known today as Conradh na Gaeilge. But which part of Belfast was it formed? Was it formed in North Belfast, South Belfast, West Belfast, or East Belfast? And I'm very proud to say that it was formed in East Belfast. In 1895, on the 19th of August, the Belfast branch of the Gaelic League was formed at a meeting in number 32 Beersbridge Road in East Belfast. This is actually the house here, and I've visited the house and I've spoken to the people who live in the house, who were amazed and really pleased to hear about the history of their house. So this is in the heart of East Belfast, and if you know East Belfast at all, it's just not too far from the Newton Arch Road. And there you go. So very, very famous history. Now, as somebody who started learning Irish, I started learning Irish 10 years ago. And in the last lot of years, when there was a lot of controversy over Irish language legislation, I was told that, read it in the newspapers, that speaking Irish will hollow out your Britishness. That's what happens. It will hollow out your Britishness, something to be feared. And I had to think about that. Will it hollow out my Britishness? Can me learning Irish, speaking Irish, does that hollow out my Britishness? So, oh dear, don't know what happened there. So what I thought was, well, there's three Gaelic languages, and there is the Irish Gaelic, there's Scots Gaelic, and there's Manx Gaelic. So there are 3 Gaelic languages. Started off as 1, and now there are 3 Gaelic languages. And here we have Glasgow, some bilingual signage in Glasgow. This is I think it was the Co-op, yeah, it was the Co-op on the west coast of Scotland. And I was over there, and this was the sort of bilingual signage in the shop. And you can see there, you've got the word meat, and underneath it, you've got the Gaelic word fuel. So this is in Scotland. But if I took you tonight to Sainsbury's on the Falls Road, there's a bilingual Sainsbury's, you'd see exactly the same thing. You would see the English word meat and you would see the Gaelic word fiol below it. But this one says, we are proud that all our fresh beef, pork, chicken, turkey and duck is British. And I don't think it says that on the one on the Falls Road, but there you go. This is, as I said, one of the churches over in Scotland. And as I was telling to you earlier, we visited, and this one is Knock Free Church, where people's first language is Gaelic. And whenever I spoke there, they asked me to speak and talk about the work that we're doing in East Belfast. And they were just amazed that anybody would presume what your politics or what your religion was because you speak a particular language, you know, because for them, the Gaelic language is the language of their home. The majority of people who speak it are actually Presbyterians, but there's a lot of Catholic people who speak it as well. And for them, it's not an indicator of anything about them, except they come from a Gaelic speaking place and it's their first language. We have a friend, Alistair Morrison. Alistair was an MSP up until he lost his seat to another guy who's a friend, Angus, who's SNP. Alistair is Labour Party. Defines himself as a unionist. His first language is Gaelic. Now, Alistair's younger than me, but he didn't learn English until he went to school. And he says he's never spoken to his mother ever in English. Now, he has beautiful English. His mother has beautiful English. But he said, you know, he would never have a reason to speak to his mother in English. Gaelic was the language that he grew up with. It was the language that his mother and his father spoke to him and his brothers and sisters spoke. It's the language of his home. And anytime Alistair's been over staying with us, you know, if his wife rings him or his children rings him, he speaks to them immediately in Gaelic because that's their first language. That's their language of love, I suppose, in many ways, the language that they're comfortable with. Here is one of their hymn books. And as I said to you, there's the Psalms. And unfortunately, we can't play music. It just doesn't work on Zoom. But I'd love to be able to let you hear them singing. Also, in my travels, I've been over to the Isle of Man, and that's another Gaelic speaking region. And the only thing different about them is they use the sort of a phonetic. They don't use the Gaelic alphabet. They spell everything phonetically, which looks very strange to me as an Irish speaker. But it's lovely to see the language everywhere. So again, you know, who owns the Irish language? You know, who does it belong to? Well, you know, at one time I didn't think it belonged to me. Whenever I started learning Irish, I had this perception of it as a Catholic language, as a Republican language, as a language of the South. But what I learned, and what a lot of people in East Belfast are learning and still continuing to learn, is it belongs to us too. It belongs to everybody. The language belongs to anybody who chooses to speak the language. You can't possess a language. A language is out there for anybody who wants to embrace it. And I have met people from all over the world who speak Irish, and it's been really interesting. One of the best Irish speakers I've met was a French guy who was just absolutely obsessed with the language and has been learning it for years, you know, and he comes to Donegal every year and they are just in awe of him because his Irish is so good, you know. So the language belongs to anybody who wants it. So we own the language. It's in our place names. It's in our surnames. It's in the speech that we use every day. It's ours. So I just wanted to pick up a few words that we all use. So whiskey, of course, comes from the Irish Ishkabaha, the water of life. How could you not like that? You know, how could that not interest you or fascinate you? And also a lot of the constructions that we use in our Hiberno English come from the Irish language. So we're very influenced by Irish. So in English, you would say he went out, that would be standard English. But in our Hiberno English, our sort of bad grammar, so to speak, we would say things like, he's after going out, he's after going out. Tá sé an dhéag golamach, tá sé an dhéag golamach. Because that's how you form it in Irish. He is after going out. That's good grammar in Irish. Standard English, you would say he is here every Monday. But in our Hiberno English, we would say he bees here on a Monday. Why do we do that? Because there's a continuous verb in Irish. There's a verb to say you do things, sometimes, and then there's a verb to say you do something all the time. So being sé an seo Jaloon, being sé an seo Jaloon, he bees here on a Monday. Have you brought your coat? No. We would say, have you your coat with you? Irish is a prepositional language. It's full of these prepositions. And will de hotalat, is your coat with you? And will de hotalat with you? Oh, I'm gonna move for me now. Sorry, I'll get stuck here. Oh, there we go. So coming back to the place names, and I just wanted to share a couple that are, or this one that sort of means a lot to me. And it's one of the ones I discovered whenever I started learning Irish, because again, being from East Belfast, I had no access to the language, didn't know anything about the language, didn't know that the language was all around me. And then I was told that the Craigie Road that I've known all my life, and never struck me why we called it Craigie, even though it's spelt Creagagh, Craigie. But as locals, we all call it Craigie. And that's because it comes from the townland, An Craigie, which means the rocky place. And anybody knows, East Belfast knows that if you go up the Craigie Road, you come to the rocky road. So the memory of the language is everywhere. It's just all around us. It seeps into us. And, somebody once said to me, why would Protestants want to learn Irish? That's not a question that I find relevant. I find a question of why would they not want to, when it's everywhere, when it's part of who and what they are, when it's part of their own place. Why would they not want to learn it? I think that's a more important question. So who owns it? Well, as I said, we own it. We all own it. I want to tell you a little bit now about the project that I run in East Belfast, Turas. And Turas started in 2011 with just a taster session in Irish, a 6-week taster session in Irish. And then we went on and started up a class, and it just grew and grew. And now it's one of the biggest language centres in all of Belfast. Hundreds of people learning Irish, all ages, all abilities. This is our singing class, our singing choir that you can see in the black t-shirts there, and our family class, our Rang Chowley. We started to raise money and send people to university, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. It's just massive now. This is some of the classes. That was September's classes. We've actually added another 4 on there for January. So we don't advertise anymore, because if we advertise, we just get far too many people. And started a new total beginners class this morning with 36 people in it. And classes going on all the time. So we've about 14 classes a week at the minute running. So these are our students at university. We have 8 learners now who are studying both at Ulster University and Queen's University. 3 of them are doing diplomas in Irish, and 5 of them are doing degrees in Irish. One of our learners who came to us to start learning Irish, then he started to volunteer in East Belfast Mission. Then he had he had never been to university himself. He didn't have any education, but he'd put all his children through university, and he decided that he wanted to study history and politics. So I was one of the people who did referee for him, and he approached Queen's University as a mature student, and they agreed to take him on even though he didn't have the necessary qualifications. He got a first in his degree, then he did a master's, and last year he started his PhD, and he said it was down to coming to Turas to do the Irish language, got him back in the education. So we're very proud of that. We're very proud of our learners. And for us, what's fantastic is not just the sheer breadth, but the depth of language that we're now achieving with people who are becoming fluent. So what we did was we started up a scholarship scheme, and as I say, the 8 people who are at university, we're helping to pay some of their fees to allow them to go to university, because we feel very strongly that the more diversity that exists within the Irish language sector, the better that is for the language and the better that is for Northern Ireland. I remember giving a talk one time on the Woodstock Road in East Belfast, and this man said to me, "You'd be better off learning French or Spanish." And in his opinion, he was right. And I hear that a lot. You'd be better off learning French or Spanish or Chinese. They're all learning Chinese now. But I don't travel. I don't like to fly. And I want to live and I want to work in Northern Ireland. And the reality is, no matter how you feel about the Irish language, there are more jobs in the Irish language than there are in French or Spanish. That's just a fact. So that's me, and I just close this down. Oh. And we can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Linda. I have heard that talk before, but I'm a firm believer in any good talk, like any good book, is worth listening to twice. I'd like to ask, is there anyone who'd like to ask a question now? And Liam can unmute you. I'll give you a few seconds on that, but just a couple of points that people made in the chat box. There was one person, there's no name against it. He or she said that they have come from the Ukraine specifically to learn Irish in Ireland, which I thought was,
wow.
Interesting.
Now, that's lovely.
That is some serious commitment. I also noted, Linda, you were too modest to mention the fact that you also are doing a degree in Irish at present. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I am. As I say, I started learning Irish 10 years ago. And the first thing I realized when I started to learn was that I'm not very good at languages. I don't have any sort of natural ability at all. And I found it really difficult. But I enjoyed the company. I liked what I was doing. So I just kept doing it. And I'm now in my second year at university. I did a GCSE, I did A-level Irish, I did a diploma in Irish. And as I say, now I'm at my second year at Queen's. And I'm just a chipper away. I just struggle on. So, you know, anybody says, oh, you can't learn Irish once you're over a certain age, or it's really hard, or I'm not very good at languages. I would dispute that and say, you know, if you just keep doing it, I always say to my learners, you know, it's like what they say in AA, keep coming back, it works. Now, not that I would be the sort of woman who would know anything about what happens in an AA meeting, but there you go.
Very good. There's a question. Someone has asked an interesting question. Mairead, thank you for your question. Has asked about Fundus and how does it get funding to operate, Linda?
How does it get? Well, different ways. I'm funded by Forest na Gaelica. Forest na Gaelica are a cross-border Irish language funder, so they were set up as part of the Good Friday Agreement, and they fund Irish language projects. So they were the first people I approached when we set up as a voluntary body at first, and then through East Belfast Mission, that's who I'm employed by. We approached Forest na Gaelica, and they agreed to fund us for a year just to see how we went. So thankfully we made a success of it. We also received funding from Community Relations Council and a lot of community organisations who do good cross-community work, and I'm proud to say that we're one of them, because though the majority of our learners are from the Protestant community. We would have a minority of learners from the Catholic community. And also, you know, when we set up our organisation, one of the things we weren't interested in was, you know, we're taking it back, you know, and that sort of an attitude. So we've always encouraged our learners to go over to West Belfast to get involved in events there. We take them over, and we've made really good links with all the other Irish language organisations. So because of that, we get funding from Community Relations Council too. We're also one of the urban village areas, and urban villages fund the four inner city parts of Belfast, which would have, you know, have suffered a lot over the Troubles with sectarianism and things. And again, they fund good community relations work. So I'm proud to say we do that. So that's where we get our funding. And like a lot of groups, we would apply to different organisations for particular project funding.
And you mentioned as well about going to West Belfast. Do you see any positive benefits this far down the line with Turas, with improvement of relations between East and West Belfast?
Oh, massive. We believe that's why they put the glider on, just for us, but that's another story.
I was going to mention that. For those who aren't familiar with Belfast, we've got this wonderful ultra-modern bus service. It's like a very long space age purple tram, and the route goes from one edge of East Belfast to the edge of West Belfast, and it's proven to be a great success as well, I'm pleased to say.
Yeah. No, well, as I say, when we started, you know, we didn't want to create this kind of wee Protestant version of the Irish language, and we felt that was very important. And unfortunately, there probably were a few people, not our learners, but people around us, and that's what I think they sort of saw the vision of Turas could have been, and that was never going to happen, you know. So we've made fantastic links with Common Clonard and Unculterland and Arsvic Rachton and you know, just so many of them in the back, and real friendships created between the organisations and between the learners. So our learners, you know, not at the minute obviously with the pandemic, but in better times, we encourage them to go to all the intensive courses, the weekend courses or day courses, and join other classes. And then what happens is then they go over, they meet people and they say, oh, I do classes in East Belfast. And that person says, oh, I wouldn't go over there, I'd be scared. And they say, wise up, come on over and we'll get you a cup of tea. So it's just created a very natural, I suppose, cross-city, you know, travel and engagement and friendships. And one of the things I'm very proud to say is, again, not at the minute because of the pandemic, but you know, I would have sat in my office with the classes going on in rooms all around me, and it was just the laughter. So people sitting down together, learning together, laughing together, and you know, there's nothing contrived about it. We don't do the 10 Catholics, 10 Protestants, and come on, let's focus on how different we are from each other. It's just people who love a language, are interested in learning it, and there you go, you know. So it's a very positive place to be working in, and a very positive work to be involved in.
Having been in and out of the building from time to time, I agree. It's got a bit of a buzz about it. Maybe could you nearly say there's a bit of glamour to it in East Belfast? Would that be fair to say? Don't
know about the glamour now, Mark. I think you're getting carried away there. I don't know who the glamorous one is. Certainly not me.
I take that as a compliment. Another question from Paddy Campbell, Linda. Very interesting talk. And how many people will be learning Irish from the Pool community? I'm not sure about PUL.
PUL, we have hundreds. The majority of our learners are from the Protestant community, and about 60 odd percent would be from the Protestant community, about 20 odd percent would be from the Catholic community, and then the rest would be others, you know. And over the years, just hundreds, you know, hundreds come, certainly don't all stay, because it's not easy learning the language. It takes a lot of dedication. But even the ones who don't stay, you know, they become friends, they become long-term friends, and but the ones who do stay, they really get stuck in, you know. And I mean, as I say, I did a class this morning. We started a new total beginners class with nearly 40 people in it, and more than 3/4 of them were all from the Protestant community. And we always asked our learners, why do you come? You know, what sort of brings you? And they have really interesting stories, and there's a myriad of reasons why they come. And one of the stories this morning, and I know he's happy for me to share it. He's actually, if you're on Twitter, you can look on my Twitter and you'll see him and his wee girl speaking Irish, because they attended their first lesson this morning. And he shared in the class that, you know, he's from the Loyalist community. He actually lives just beside the mission. And he hated the Irish language, and he had a big problem with me. He had a big issue with me. And he had to go away for a few years and really think about that and come to terms with the fact that, yeah, no, he owned the language too. And now, today, he was sitting with his 8-year-old daughter, both of them learning Irish. So that's a big journey for him. But there's a lot of people on journeys, not just in East Belfast, but in Northern Ireland. And that's something I suppose I've been aware of over the last lot of years with the language, because, you know, I get a lot of stick, and over the years I've got a lot of stick from people because of the stance that I've taken on the language, and because of the fact that I run an Irish language centre. But what I've seen is, certainly not all of them, but I have seen some of those people who have then wandered into Turas and said, what time's your classes at? You know, and that's really interesting. One girl who she became one of my volunteers, and at the very beginning she tried to organise protests out on the street. Now nobody was interested, nothing happened, but she ended up becoming a volunteer. She was the one who offered you a cup of tea when you come in, you know, so very interesting. Another guy, Cecil, he's a real case. He arrived, we were having like a sort of a public meeting, and he wandered in. I didn't know who he was. And he started shouting, I'm in the Orange Order, and they might up that road to throw stones at us. And one of my learners, who happens to be a loyalist paramilitary, said, are these Irish speaking stones? You know? So he used to give me dirty looks in the building, and you know, all this sort of thing. And any of my volunteers, he didn't give them dirty looks. And then one day he wandered up and he said to me, Linda, the Orange Order says I'm not allowed to learn Irish. What time's your class on the night? And that's it. Now, I have to say, he was never a good student, and he doesn't actually learn any Irish. He just kind of hangs about with us. But we did take him to, Meath with us, actually. And there was a guy, Eamon, lovely guy, who had organised this visit for us to go down to Meath to the Conry na Gaelic group down there. And he came along with us. And I said, Eamon, this is Cecil. And Eamon said, oh, Cecil, lovely to meet you. Cecil B. DeMille. And Cecil said, sorry, but I don't speak any Irish. That's a true story.
It sounds like there's endless positive stories.
Oh, there's so many. And then there's the other extreme. You've people like Stephen, you know, Stephen, who's a young fella in his 20s. He's one of the ones who we're supporting at university, who 5 years ago started learning Irish and now is totally fluent. You know, it's really quite amazing. So another one, if you're online, go on to QFT, Queen's Film Theatre, and have a wee look. We have a series of animations. We launched the first one, Gail's story, about one of our learners who came about 6-7 years ago. She's from the Newton Arch Road. She's now at university. And at the end of January, we're going to launch Ivor's story. So watch out for that.
Oh, I've seen those animations. They're delightful.
Yeah.
Very imaginative way of bringing people to the language. And another question, Linda, about COVID and how it's affected the classes, and are they it sounds like they're proceeding okay.
Yeah, well, as soon as the pandemic came in March, my teachers were great. We were sent, you know, I work for East Belfast Mission, their Methodist Church, so we were all sent home. So we immediately moved the classes online, and it was a bit of a steep learning curve for everybody, but they've been great, and now they're all hands at it. So in the new term there in September, the classes went, and they're going, numbers are good, people are enjoying it, the crack's good. And, you know, even on Zoom, you can have a bit of a social life. We had our first kosher na Nollaig, our first Christmas party in December there, and I just wasn't sure how it would go because, you know, I was sort of worried because usually our last week of classes in Turas, normally there's mince pies at every class, and it's a party at every class, and the slurs poured everywhere. We're a Methodist Church, no alcohol, and you know, and all the bulla boss and whatnot. And I thought, oh, you know, will people come? And we had 3 of them dressed up as Santa Claus, so that really, really went to town. And they sang and played music, and oh, you know, it was just a wonderful night, and stayed on and chatted. So, and after mince pies, we couldn't supply them. So yeah, we're still keeping things going. And I suppose that was the thing that struck me when COVID came. You know, we are a community. We're more than just classes. We are a community of learners. There's very strong friendships. And whenever, you know, whenever the classes went on and there was that consistency, you know, I didn't know, is it the right thing to do to keep the classes going? Or, you know, what do you do in a pandemic? Nobody prepares you for it. But the number of people who phoned me and sent emails and messages to say, thank you, because this just keeps some sort of sense of normality going. This gives me something to keep my head around, because I'm, you know, I'm on my own, or I'm worried, I'm frightened, or whatever. And it was a lovely way of we were able to keep in touch with our learners. And as I say, just keep up that sense of community, because that's who we are. We are a community.
Yeah, and I'm guessing as well, looking at it longer term, there's been bigger challenges to overcome in setting this up than COVID and having to communicate remotely. There's been far bigger challenges down the road to get you here.
At the beginning, yeah. In what way, Mark, are you meaning?
Well, to get funding, to get...
Oh, yeah,
If those who aren't aware, Turas has run its modern, spacious premises that have been developed.
Yeah.
But the class is in absolutely wonderful, and the classes are held in an absolutely wonderful environment in a very modern building.
Yeah. No, and it has been slow. You know, it's been 9 years now, and you know, and it didn't come easy. We were very small at the start, and you know, I didn't know whenever I left my job to take up the post as development officer with Turas when we first got the funding. I had no idea. I remember my husband, I lived behind East Belfast Mission. I remember my husband saying, Linda, you need to keep your mouth shut, because we're not going to have any windows, you know. And you know, I have to be honest too, and there's been some very difficult days. I mean, I have people who I would have regarded at one time as friends who no longer speak to me. That is hurtful. You know, it's one thing to get nasty messages on social media or to get threats, but it's another thing when people that you know personally and you've been close to who turn their back on you, you know, and family members as well, unfortunately. No blood relatives, thankfully. My blood relatives have more sense. But one of the things I do find interesting is nobody, not the people who know me or not the people who don't know me, nobody has ever come up to my face and said, I don't like what you do. Now, I'm not very big, you know, I'm 5 foot nothing, and I'm not that scary. But, you know, it strikes me that these people haven't the guts, or that they don't have do they not have the belief in what they believe? I don't know, you know, but there you go.
Yeah, certainly lots more positives than negatives.
Very much. I've really, really good people around me, and I think that's one of the things that strengthens me. And I always say, you know, Turas means journey, and Turas is the name of our project. And I started out on this journey on my own, and now there's hundreds of us, you know, so it's fantastic.
And I find it very inspiring, the resourcefulness and the new ideas that keep coming up, and the multi-strand approach to it as well. Would you like to mention a few of the other things, like for instance schooling and GAA? I know there's always other ideas coming into the mix. It's such a dynamic and developing thing.
Well, I think it's just because I suppose we've listened to other voices within our learners, and you know, when people say, what about, can we try? You know, we have always been open. I suppose we've been in a position where we can be experimental, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So, you know, at the very start, one of the first things that came up was we decided to do music, and that then grew into a once a month traditional music session, which unfortunately doesn't run anymore. It went on for a lot of years. And it also grew into a music class, and it grew into a choir, and now, you know, we go out and we sing. We started, we had a family class around Chowley with parents and children, and that has now come to the point where we are hoping to open a cross-community school, an Irish medium nursery school, and we have parents who have signed up for that, and we hope someday then to move that into a bund school and an integrated Irish medium primary school, and it'll be the first of its kind, because we have linked up with the integrated sector and the Irish medium sector, and that has never happened before. We also run a very successful tourism project, and Mark knows about that because he's been involved with that, and I'm hoping he's going to have greater involvement in that as things go forward. So my colleague, Dr. Gordon Mccoy, Gordon is absolutely fantastic. Gordon lives in East Belfast, and you know, I had become more and more frustrated because I started to learn about the townlands. I started to learn a little bit about the history of East Belfast, and I knew there was so much more, but I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the ability, and I didn't have the time to find out more. And then Gordon walked in, and he brought all his years of research and his PhD and his wonderful extensive knowledge, and he came to volunteer with us first of all, and then he ended up working for us. So with all of the research Gordon has done over the years, and Gordon's a fluent Irish speaker, we started up the tourism project, and we launched 2 bus tours. So we did have, and we will have again when the pandemic's over, 2 bus tours a month. One, the Gaelic bus tour of East Belfast, which takes you all through different periods of history, and the other one, the Con O'Neill bus tour. And Con O'Neill was the last Gaelic lord of East Belfast and Castlereagh, and so many of our names come from from his I suppose influence very much. We sell wonderful merchandise online, and over Christmas there our gifts were just flying off the shelves, and we're widening our line. We're going to do a special one for some Valentine's Day, so any of the romantics among you there, keep an eye out for that. And Christmas cards, all sorts of things. So it has just went in all sorts of ways. Then last year, and this isn't involved, well, I suppose it links in with Turas a bit, I was asked to become the president of East Belfast GAA, which was set up last year. And I thought about it and I said yes. And then I told my husband and he said, no, that's too late. There you go. But he's fine about it now. His brand needs a push sometimes,
Excellent.
And they're fantastic. Oh, they're just great young people, really brilliant.
This is a good time. You've mentioned Gordon, and I'm honoured to know him as well. And his enthusiasm and his knowledge is a sight to behold. But it's a good time to ask a question that Alan has come in with you, asking would that map behind you have any particular significance?
It absolutely does. My colleague, Dr. Gordon Mccoy, worked on that. It's the Gaelic Map of Belfast. First of all, Gordon did one of East Belfast, which we sell online. It's all the townlands. And this one then, he was asked to do this one by Belfast City Council. So this one is it's available free from Belfast City Council. So it's a beautiful, beautiful townland map of Belfast. Gordon, I think, spent maybe over 2 years of his life. I ended up nearly hunched. And the attention to details, Mark will tell you, but it's absolutely beautiful, and just all the different townlands.
Yeah, I was just fortunate to be in one of my random visits to the office in the day that he was excited about going down to pick up the first print from the printer across the road as well, which is great. And
there were many drafts after that because he just couldn't leave any. Minute detail.
Fantastic. Now, it's probably nearly an hour, and Linda, I've got another 44 messages to have a quick skim through here. So I'll try and keep it brief for everyone because I feel that our time it should nearly be up. I'll just run through, probably mainly comments, but there might be a question or two. Colin O'Rourke saying thanking you, and here's the day when Irish is appreciated by everyone on the island. Connor thanking you, a very informative presentation. And here's somebody called Camden. How can I best support the Irish language as an American? Do you have any affiliations in the US? I'm about to finish my PhD in linguistic anthropology with a focus on the Irish language.
Wow. Well, I mean, because everything's online now, it's, you know, I have a few Americans, not just 2 or 3 Americans actually attending my online classes at present.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Cormac, if I'd like to, Cormac would like to ask a question, and he is unmuted. Cormac, sorry for the delay. If you'd like to go ahead.
Nobby Berha, Mark, Gurmia my agat, Linda, agus my who for all of the work that you do. I just want to say, just first of all, that I have so much respect and admiration for you and the work that you do in, you know, for the Irish language, and not just the language itself, but in breaking down those social barriers around Irish. I think the work that you're doing in East Belfast and that your colleagues are doing is just fantastic. So please do keep it up. I guess my question for you is just a quick wee question, and then the second one. First question is, does that house in East Belfast you mentioned that Conradh na Gaeilge was the East Belfast Parents Fan, does it have like a plaque or anything commemorated?
Yeah,
or
it doesn't. Now, we were interested in getting a plaque and the Ulster History Society, but the problem is that they won't put an organisation, they'll only put a person's name, and we didn't want the person's name, we wanted the organisation, we wanted Conradh na Gaeilge on the plaque. So we actually considered putting our own plaque up on it, and we spoke to the people who were living in the house. This has come back probably about 4 years ago, and they were totally up for it. There was no problem. So I don't think it's an issue, and I think it's something that probably should be done and needs to be done.
Very good, Gareth Mayogat.
Thank you, Cormac. Here's an interesting observation from Matthew. Linda, Matthew's wondering why, when we speak English, do we call it Irish instead of Gaelic, when in the language itself we call it Gaeilge, not Ernach.
Mm-hmm.
I find a better response often from Protestants when I call it Gaelic and point out that different variations of it are spoken in Man and Scotland.
Yeah. Unfortunately, and I've sort of got caught up in this myself, where you get people who don't like it being called Gaelic, and you get people who don't like it being called Irish for different reasons. And some people don't like it being called Gaelic because they feel that that's kind of ignoring the fact that it's from the island of Ireland, or so they say. I don't really understand that. And the other ones who don't like it being called Irish because they don't like anything that's really Irish, I think. You know, the Red Hand Commando definitely don't like it being called Irish. And I call it both. I jump between the two. But I also understand that when you say Gaelic, you're not differentiating between the three. They are 3 separate languages now, 3 sister languages, which is Manx Gaelic, 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 and then Gaelic, and then Gaelic in Ireland, and Gaelic in Scotland. But also, and I find this interesting, and I've just finished a module on it in sociolinguistics in Queen's with my Irish degree. And really what it says is, you know, who decides what's a language and what's a dialect? So some people would regard Gaelic as a dialect of Irish. And I mean, at one time it was Irish. And what I learned was that there's no linguistic reason why something is called a language or called a dialect. It's basically political. So if you've got an army, you're more likely to have a language and a dialect, you know. So I don't think it matters really whether you call it Irish or you call it Gaelic. I really don't get into it. And as I said to the Red Hand Commandos, who do get very excited about that sort of thing, and, you know, as I told you, their motto was in Irish, I said to them, like, you know, rather than getting worried about what it's called, why don't you just learn it? Why don't you just claim it, you know, and get over it? So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and assume your firm belief is if everyone owns a language, that neutralizes it politically.
Very much. And I feel, and again, you know, I don't like this idea of I think Aidan McPoland, the late wonderful Aidan McPoland, who headed up the Ultac Trust, and Aidan was a very good friend of Turas. He made a very, I think, very pertinent statement. And people talk about the politicization of the language, and a lot of people, talk to me about politicization, and I noticed, and I felt a bit uncomfortable. I have to say, it was something advertised in this that talked about the weaponization of the language, and I'm not comfortable with that at all. And Aidan, the late Aidan, was, I have to, he was no friend of Sinn Féin, let's put it that way. But what he said to people was, when you're talking about depoliticizing the language, I think really what you're meaning is don't let Sinn Féin use it. And that's another game. And I may not vote Sinn Féin, but they have every right to use the Irish language, as I have every right to use the Irish language, as you have every right to use the Irish language. And unfortunately, sometimes when people talk about depoliticizing the language, that's what they basically mean. You can do what you want with it, but don't let them use it. And that's not a game I want to play. I'm not interested in them's and us's and all that nonsense, because I think there's so much of that in Northern Ireland. It's not helpful. It's not helpful at all. There are things Sinn Féin do to the language that wouldn't be my cup of tea, that wouldn't be my first choice, that might make me feel, but they have every right to do it. And I acknowledge that and I accept that.
Well said. Skimming on as quickly as I can, which is not very fast. Sarah has asked. She said the talk was brilliant, and she's asking, has it been recorded? And yes, just to confirm that it has been recorded, and that Tarsna and Natira will make the talk available on YouTube afterwards. So certainly it's available via the Facebook page. Certainly, I don't know if it's available any other way. Maybe somebody could put up a message and chat on that. Let me see. A very interesting one here from Heather McLean. Linda, I did my MA research on Protestant Irish speakers in the Republic of Ireland. Such a long history with a language that too many people want to ignore and deny. It's a very interesting point. Eugene Lamb mentioning Brian Frield's wonderful play Translations, dealing with the Anglicization of place names, set in the fictional village of Ballybeg in Donegal.
It's a wonderful play.
Now, of course, I know of it, and I got a copy in a second-hand bookshop recently, but I've still to read it. But of course, that was a very a landmark time when the Ordnance Survey wrote down all the Irish names. So, and of course, it's interpreted in many ways as a good thing and a bad thing. So, I guess there's two sides to that, like to many of these things.
Yeah, well, it deals with the transliteration, and I think what's interesting about it is when the official names became English, is very, very few of them were changed. Very, very few of them were actually translated, and the most of them were transliterated. So they were just given English spelling, but it meant that the Irish sits underneath, and as it's sort of, I suppose, in a way, saved the meaning of the line of the place names. One of the examples I use, because again it's close to my heart, and I talked about Craigie earlier, but I'm from East Belfast, but my mother was from North Belfast and married my daddy from East Belfast. So my mother is from a place in North Belfast called Laganeel, and I never ever heard it called anything but Laganeel. And my mum always, I think she's about 82 now, and I actually said to her recently, Mum, like, tell me where you're from. And, well, what are you talking about? I said, tell me what you call it. And she says, Laganeel. Now, if you heard people today, people who are not originally from Laganeel, they talk about Liganeel, but it's not Liganeel. Now, it's spelt, sometimes it's spelled L-I, sometimes it's spelled L-E, but the reason that locals called it Laganeel and still call it Laganeel is because, again, it's another Irish language place name, and it's Laganeel, and it is the hollow of the limestone. Now, how beautiful is that, And for me, if you don't have any access to the language, Laganeel doesn't mean anything, but Laganeel does,
Yeah, and of course it describes the place well too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's got nothing to do with O'Neill's, surprisingly.
No, absolutely nothing to do with the O'Neills. It is the limestone.
Yeah, halfway up the hillside, looking down over Belfast.
Mm-hmm.
So here's I will try and get down some of these comments very quickly. Hogan has said, excellent presentation, Linda. Thank you. You're leading the way in helping people realise that their language, Irish language, belongs to everyone, irrespective of how they or others may perceive their identity. And then I'm afraid I can't speak the Irish bits. Apologies for that. Brian was asking, what do the politicians north and south need to do to make dual language signage a success and something that will be universally accepted by both unionist and nationalist communities? That's a bit of a question. I'm thinking that in context of Scotland as well, which is moving on in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's a very tough one. I mean, you know, I sort of joke about it, and it's not funny, but you know, I say that you know, people like they're interested when they find out about their townland names, and you know, people like that there's a meaning, but they don't like the signage. There's a real bugbear with the signage, and there's something about signage that seems to really threaten some people. Maybe it's easy for me to look at it. You know, I think if they're turned around tomorrow and said, right, we'll take all the English off the signs now, there's something to get excited about, you know. Yeah. But sort of sharing a sign with another language, I don't feel that should be an issue, but obviously it is an issue. And I remember last year there was a bit of a situation. Belfast City Council, it's part of their new language policy. We're looking at talking about bilingual signage and whatnot. So we have a new leisure centre in East Belfast, Lisnashara Leisure Centre, which was just about to open, and there was a public meeting about whether there should be multilingual signage, bilingual signage, or monolingual signage in it. And because of my job, I am the Irish Language Development Officer in East Belfast, I had to go to the meeting. I knew it wasn't going to be fun, but anyway, my husband and I rocked up. Interestingly enough, it was all council workers, and there was actually 3 members of the public there. And they were quite angry members of the public, let's put it that way. And they started to shout about the fact we'll not be having any Irish language signs in our new leisure centre and whatnot, you know, and it was just that very stereotypical kind of carry on. And I pointed out the fact to them that, of course, Lisnashara is Irish, Lisnashara, the Ford of the Foes, but that didn't sort of hold any water, because as far as they were concerned, you know, the language was something being forced on them by violent republicanism, and it was all about, you know, every word of Irish is another bullet in the cause or something, whatever, you know. But what's even more interesting, of course, I knew it was there, but it just sort of struck me as I sat there, and I thought, you know, I actually suggested, well, what about a nice big mural of horses to, you know, as a sort of a nod towards Irish speakers. But when I left, I drove past the local primary school, and the local primary school, which is round the corner, is Lisnashara Primary School. And their badge that all their children wear on their jumpers, and it's on the school sign outside, is 4 horses, and underneath it says the Ford of the Foes, because that's what Lisnashara means, you know. And I suppose the mischief in me, I thought, well, you know, what if somebody came and put that Lisnashara in Irish? What would it change? You know, what would happen? Would the world fall down? Would everybody in Lisnashara school start voting for Sinn Féin? You know, would we run into a United Ireland? I don't think so, you know. But somebody, whoever created the badge for Lisnashara Primary School, I would guess back in the 60s, were aware of the townland name, were aware of the Irish language, and we're very proud of it. And that it's not the only school in East Belfast that has an Irish language badge and an Irish language meaning, you know. And nothing has changed, because it doesn't say anything except this is the place of the foes, this is the Fort of the Foes, you know.
Excellent, thank you, Linda. I will try to rattle through a few here as efficiently as I can. Michael Boyle congrats, Linda from Newfoundland.
Oh, wonderful! Wow.
Now he has said that I wonder is this the name of the place he lives? I'm afraid I'll have to spell it. It's 3 words. ALAMH, then AN, then EISC. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
That's
Turas place name in Newfoundland. Sorry,
you froze there, so I didn't get it all.
That means Turas, which is the land of fish.
land
So
of fish.
that is Newfoundland, yeah.
Oh, excellent! I've learned something.
And it happens to be it's the only Irish language place name that's different from the local place name for a country in the world.
Wow.
Excellent, Dermot. Many thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Right.
Now, let me see. And here is a question from Alexander. Wonderful talk, Linda, and very inspiring. Thank you. Are there any other groups like?
You've frozen again there, Mark. Can you still hear me, everybody?
Yes, we still hear you.
That's okay. Well, Mark is frozen, but I would say that the question was, were there any other groups like Turas? I don't know. Now we helped to get some other groups kind of going. I know the U3A organization runs a lot of classes all over the place. There were, Ultac Trust used to run wonderful ones in the Lennon Hall Library, but they're gone. Ballymoney, we helped to get classes started there, but it didn't last, unfortunately. There were ones in a Methodist Church over in North Belfast for a long time, but the minister moved on, and I think they kind of died a death there before the pandemic. And there were some running down in Carrick, but they're kind of wee sort of one isolated classes. At the minute, there's nobody like Turas at the minute. But one of the things I really, and I do genuinely believe this, I think one of the things that will be the mark of our success is whenever, we have encouraged other groups within the Unionist community to do the same thing as we did. And they'll be so successful that they'll totally overshadow us and knock us out of the water. And nobody will be talking about Turas or Linda Ervine. They'll be talking about whatever this wonderful group is. And that will be a mark of our success one of these days.
Thank you. Question answered. Thank you.
You're on mute, Stephen. Stephen, you're muted.
Stephen, you're on mute.
Oh no. Yes, I'm
sorry.
Didn't hear away there, and I said so much good stuff, and as always. But here, I got a message from Mark Dogger. He says his car has just went out in his house.
Oh
so
dear.
He can't continue. But to be honest, it's probably a good time to maybe call time on it now. Linda, a fascinating talk. Brian talk. Thank you very much for coming on. It's very good of you. And to Mark as well for hosting it. And
well, thank you. Lovely audience. Lovely to meet you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Our next talk from Trasnatira is on next Monday, and that should be another good one. Advertisement is up on Trasnatira. Thank you all for coming tonight. And thank you again to Linda and Mark.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Hawaii.
Yeah,